Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how I built this shaker candle stand all out of cherry with a wipe-on finish, and it's really not as hard as you might think. So stay tuned to find out how. I started by just cutting out and making some designs for the legs just on paper, cut them out, and then I stuck them on some 1/2-inch MDF that I got at the store, because I want to be able to make this again if I choose to. So having the templates can really decrease the amount of time it'll take to do it again, because I probably spent a few hours just making templates on this build. Got to use the new spindle sander here. I had this project in mind when I set out to buy this tool, and it really does a great job for making templates or doing anything, because you basically can't cut curves on a bandsaw smoothly unless you have a spindle sander there you can smooth it out after the fact. Otherwise you'll be kind of out of luck hand sanding or using a curved spoke shave or something, but nothing really works as good as the spindle sander there. I used a lot of double-sided tape in this build. It was very, very helpful for sure. What you'll notice with the legs too is something you want to watch, is having the grain of the wood going along the leg. The thinnest part of the leg will have the grain running with it. To just give it the most strength, because if the grain was running this way, it would easily just snap off. Not something you'd want. I do not recommend this method. I do not have a router table, and that would be the safest and best method. I just kind of stuck the plunge spring of my router down into my wagon vise, tightened it up, which was somewhat okay, and then try to do this by hand. Ideally, you'd have like a pivoting point on your router table and be able to do this a little bit safer, because if it bites, it does take off on you. It's a little bit scary. So do not recommend this method, but it was what I had and it seemed like the quickest and easiest way to do it. Here I'm gluing up my column for the center post. Ideally I'd want to use like a solid piece of cherry, but I don't have a 3-inch thick piece of cherry. So I did this instead, and I think it turned out really good. You can kind of tell, but only if you're really looking for it. And this is me kind of getting used to my lathe. Probably only the second or third thing that I've turned, definitely the biggest to this point. Might need to look into getting a longer tool rest, so you don't have to stop and kind of chunks it more. Laying out everything, all my designs, and then I'll take it down with the parting tool to that thickness. For the most part on the lathe here, I was using some old lathe tools that aren't that sharp. I tried sharpening them on the grinder, but just kind of gave it a quick once over, and they're not the greatest. But I did buy this roughing gouge that came sharpened, and it does really work well. So I did as much as I could with it. I really like the Rikon lathe. I haven't even had to change the belt size. I've been just using it on the middle of the 3 different pulleys, and yeah, just the variable speed is all I've used so far and all I need. I have used the reverse function for sanding, which makes it real nice. And there I'm starting to kind of do this bead. It chipped off a couple times, so I had to make it smaller, I think one time. This is my first kind of intricate beadwork with the lathe. It turned out okay. Definitely having some problems getting nice sharp edges on the tips of these beads here. Probably because my tools aren't super sharp. But I did get a new roughing gouge, so I did as much as I could with that. And then I just sanded the heck out of it afterwards. It does have some sanding marks in the rotational plane here, so I didn't do as much sanding afterwards with the grain as much as I should have, but it's not too bad. I'm okay with it. One of the things that was really going to be challenging to me was how I was going to do these dovetails at the bottom to connect the legs to the center column here. So as you'll see, I have a jig that I made. While this column is on the lathe, you just set it around it and you can route with the dovetail router bit going straight up and straight through. Just one easy pass, and then you can cut the dovetails on the legs to match that width. So you don't have to worry about taking two passes on the column. You can just take one and then cut the legs to width to fit the bottom there. And they really went on very nicely without too much work. As you see, I decided to do, for the legs, join the legs together with the column. I would actually route out on the column with just a straight bit, just pretty much like 1/8 of an inch in, just basically so you're getting each edge touching, and then using the dovetail bit to router out the dovetail. I did this so I didn't have to give an angled cut on the shoulders of the legs, because I thought it would just be easier if I would just route it and then I can just put the leg right in instead of having to, do the routing on each side of the leg and then give a little angle. And to me, it seemed like it would be difficult to get the depth of the dovetail right before and after you cut those shoulders. So to me, this just seems like the easier way to do it, and it went pretty smooth. So I'd recommend doing it that way. I didn't get a good picture of the actual dovetailed routering, but then to get the other side for the leg to go into that dovetail mortise, I just clamped it to the side of my bench because, again, I don't have a router table, so this is my ingenious way of thinking of how to do it best. It actually worked really well. Just lined it up flush with the top and then put a backer board there for the depth and just flipped it around and did really well. I cut off the top since it's a rounded router bit, so I wouldn't have to chisel out more than I had to in the column. Here's me just straightening up the top end where that, like I said, the curved part of the router bit is showing, just so it would go all the way up there and in. This didn't take too long. Just a couple little taps and cleared it out. Had to do it in my lap because I didn't know where else to put it. I didn't have a good soft vise. I didn't want to mar up any of the edges, but it worked. More double-sided tape. So I stuck it down to the bench, and I also put it against that other piece to give it a little more support if the tape would fail, but then also the other piece is there to help support the router, to give it to more of a base so the router isn't rocking back and forth. I did do a little bit of hand sanding, a little bit to a lot, just to kind of smooth it out and make all the routering flow together real nice. So it gives it a nice touch. I tried to match the grain for the top as best I could. I think it actually turned out really well. You really can't look at it unless you look at the side where the knot is. Kind of matches and flows in. So I planed it a little bit, and then I used just like an auto body sander, foam pad that's about 8 inches long to get it to nice level flatness. Then I took about 3 passes going around with this jig. You do have to watch some of the tear out when you're going around the end grain for the circle. It's not terrible, but it's not super smooth either, so I had to do some more sanding on that. So I was cutting this hole to match the size of the hole at the top of the column. Then I did 2 recessed screws for that backing plate. And then I just flush trimmed up the wedges. I put 3 in there because it was a little loose and needed a little bit more expansion, but it worked. So here I'm putting it on. The finish I did 2 coats of Waterlock's original finish sealer. Gave it at least 24 hours in between each coat. And then I did a paste wax finish. I used SC Johnson's paste wax. So far I did 1 coat applying it with 4-0 steel wool, so it kind of applies it and knocks down your small little hiccups in your finish while you're putting your wax on, which worked really well. I'm probably going to put another coat yet on the top just to give it a little bit more even sheen. It's pretty good, but there's little dollar spots here and there just to kind of even it up and hopefully maybe give it even a little bit smoother finish. So, but overall, really happy. Not as intimidating as it might look. Probably took about 15 hours, including building the jigs and being my first major thing on the lathe. I did get to use 2 new tools that I got. I got this guy on Craigslist this week. Pretty happy about it. Jet spindle sander. Works great. And used that for my templates for the legs. I got to use the lathe to turn out that column. So just a project that I've always been looking at thinking, I think I can make that. It doesn't look too terribly intimidating, but it does look pretty cool. So that's something I'll have and be able to kind of use for hopefully a while. But yeah. And that wax really does give it a nice smooth finish. So I am happy I put the wax on. I wasn't sure, like I was, Waterlocks, maybe I'll just 4-0 steel wool that and it'll be good, but I think the wax did help it. Give it a nice little satin sheen and it's just really nice to touch. I just can't stop touching it. So, all right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. And there'll be more videos coming out.